Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to show you how to plan your work in Tana, going from weeks to months of planning. And I'm going to show you how to implement that Supertag system step by step inside Tana. So what do I mean by planning for different time horizons? What I mean is that I find a year, for example, too long to plan, right? There's too many things in flux that can change over time. And a month is a really short period, right? Like I really think 4 weeks is too short for many projects, especially if you do things like this, like I'm doing with this channel on the side next to a day job. Then 4 weeks is especially short. But even if something is a full-time job for you, in my experience, 4 weeks is too short. So what I like to do is I plan in half years and I divide these up into 6-week blocks. And my half years I call a super cycle, and my 6 weeks blocks are macro cycles. And every super cycle, every half year, has 6 macro cycles, 6-week periods, plus 2 weeks of slack. So if you get sick for a week or you take a vacation for a week or two, it kind of still works into the half year framework. Now, what do we do with this in Tana? What Tana does is it allows us to set up super tags that guide our planning for that period, right? That neatly fit into each other and complement each other, and that help us guide us through our weeks in these periods and keep us focused on task. So what we're going to do in this tutorial is I'm going to show you how to set up the planning system based on super cycles and macro cycles that interlinks with other things you might have seen. So the interstitial journaling video I did, which I'm going to link over here, has been super well received, and that focuses on planning and structuring your work on the half-hour to 2-hour time frame. And now we're going to go a block above basically and see, okay, how do we structure things along weeks and half years. So let's jump right into Tana and we'll take it from there, and I'll show you how to implement this step by step in a really powerful way. All right, so here we are inside Tana, and what I want to do with you is first go through a couple of design questions for the system that I'm going to show you. This is something that I teach in my course on using Tana, Mastering Tana Core, and I find it really helpful to guide your thinking and your design of Supertag systems. So what are the design questions that I'm talking about? First, what is the domain that this Supertag system covers? In our case, that is planning, right? Like we're trying to plan for 6 months and 6 weeks. For what are we going to use the system? We're going to use the system to guide our work over a period of time, and the goal is to get things done, right? And we want to never lose sight of where we're trying to get, and we're going to engineer a couple of ways that guide our work during these different time frames. And then third, what questions do we want answers for? We want answers to questions like what should I work on right now? What did I set as the priority or the overall mission for the current half year, 6-month period? What's the goal for the next 6 weeks? What projects are going to happen, need to happen toward a specific goal? These sorts of things. And what we're going to do is look at the super tags that make that happen next. All right, let's briefly look at the layout of the super tag system. And this is also something that I talk about in the course, is that you want to enumerate the terms, the things that you want to have as super tags, as concepts in your Supertag system. So the first one is the supercycle, right? So supercycle, again, 6-month period, has 4 macro cycles. So that's the next thing that we're going to look at. Then during every macro cycle, we're going to look at one or many goals, and we're going to run different experiments. And of course, we're going to do work as well. So we have a project and a task. And now, before we jump into the details here of how to set this up, let me show you how that looks like a little bit in practice so that you get a feel for what's actually going to happen once we've set up all the fields. And don't worry, I'm going to take you through every single field in detail and how to set it up. So let's look at the demo first. We have supercycles, right? Supercycles here have a start date and an end date, right? A 6-month period. For the first supercycle in 2023, we have Monday, January 2nd to Sunday, July 2nd of this year. Then I have written a little bit of an overall statement here of what is supposed to happen during this cycle, and we'll review in half a year. And then I have set up a live search, a live query for all the macro cycles that I have already defined. As I mentioned in the beginning, there's 4 macro cycles to each super cycle. I've only set up 2 here, but these will collect as you know. Now let's look into a defined macro cycle. This is linked to the super cycle. It has a start date and an end date. And then I have a couple of goals here: publish 1 YouTube video per week, publish 1 Twitter thread per day. And we have experiments. So taking cold showers every morning is one experiment I'm running. And here are the fields for that. And then, of course, we talked about projects. So here I have one example project set up. This serves a specific goal, right? You see here I have a goal: publish 1 YouTube video per week. And here this is mentioned as the goal that this project serves. And I find this a really nice ladder of connection between the actual work and what I'm working towards, right? And then we have the status, in progress, the final form, what do I want this to look like, and then a live query that looks for all the tasks that are linked to that specific project. And so here this links to that, status, due date, planned for, right? And so this is what this will enable the Supertag system once we have built it through completely. I hope this makes sense as a general outline of where we're trying to go. So let's look into the different Supertags in detail and see how they're built and how the fields are defined so that you can build along if you want. So the Supertag system. The supercycle has 4 fields. The first one is the supercycle ID. This is just a plain node field, as is the supercycle name. And this generates the name of the node because we're going to build the title of the node from fields, right? So here we're saying, okay, take the supercycle ID and put it next to the supercycle name as the title of the node. And then we have a start date and an end date. These are generic fields that live not in the schema, because I'm going to share this Supertag system as a link you can import into your own, but those would be schema fields so that you can reuse them easily in different types of nodes, as we're going to see in just a second. But start date and end date are of field type date. No auto initialization going on here. aren't required, even though I could set that, but this is a very simple setup. You will also note that I don't have any structure for the supercycle field, like I have no other nodes defined here that would give you any headings of some sort, because for me this is mostly a collection thing where I'm writing the overall mission, and that's it. I do have, as you saw here on the left, here a search setup that we could transport here, but for now I've set it up here, and this is something you can experiment with as well, of course, and maybe we'll add one here to this particular supercycle as well. So this is all there is to set up for the supercycle as a super tag. Macrocycles work similarly. They have a macrocycle ID and a macrocycle name, and both of these are used as the fields that build the title. Then we have a supercycle field, and this supercycle field is an instance field of the supercycle field, right? So this is every piece linked here is going to be a supercycle. And as I'm scrolling down here, you see I have checked field has semantic function. And I'm going to show you what that does a little bit later. But the semantic function that is currently available is part of. So keep that in mind for later, how that happened. And remember, I have set this here for the supercycle field in the macrocycle super tag. One thing to note here is that I'm following a convention of naming fields in title case and super tags in lowercase. And what this allows me to do is really easily distinguish between, okay, this is a field and this is supposed to be a tag, and not get confused. Okay, is the supercycle field the supercycle tag? Uppercase supercycle is the field, lowercase is the actual tag itself. Then we have here the start and end date fields again. And just to remind you how adding fields works, all you have to do is type the larger than sign at the very start of a node, right? So if I'm going here and I type this, boom, it is a field, and I can search for the field that I want. So supercycle ID is a field I now could enter here, but I'm not going to. All right, so let's get rid of that. And here you see for the macrocycle as well, I have sections defined where I'm going to enter additional information. One thing to note is that here for goal and experiments, what you can do is if you hit Command K, search for set default tag for children. And if I select goal here, what that means is that if I hit enter here, you see the goal super tag is immediately applied to a child node here of the goal node. That's super convenient, especially if you define this inside the super tags, because it lets you kind of automate away a little bit of work of applying the correct super tag in a given location. So we have goals and we have experiments. Now let's look at the goal super tag. So this has one field, and the only field here is linking it to the macrocycle it is part of. And again, part of here is an actual thing with meaning, in that the field type of the field is an instance field where the instance super tag is macrocycle, of course, and then we have a semantic function of part of defined here. Good, so that is the goal. I just name it something and then tag it with the goal super tag. Nothing more going on here. And then we have an experiment. This is a little bit more involved. Here, again, we record the start date and the end date. And we have an option field called experimental status. That has 3 predetermined options: planning, running, and concluded. That helps to distinguish the current state of the experiment, of course, and then we do auto collect values if we ever want to include an ad hoc different status that we right now don't think of, but for now it is only 3. And then I record an hypothesis, interventions, and results. And the idea basically is to, over a course of 6 weeks or shorter, to have interventions like I'm going to take a cold shower, and then explicitly test an hypothesis, what's going to happen, and at the end record results, right? This isn't super scientific, it's n equals 1, so it's just me, and you need to have some sort of way to record the dependent variable, if you will, so what the outcome is. So for the experiment that we have defined here of take cold showers every morning, and the hypothesis is taking cold showers every morning will increase my energy throughout the day, I need to have some way to record my energy throughout the day so that I can see, okay, is this actually changing anything, right? But that goes far beyond what this Supertag system can do. But just to mention that you obviously also want to record the outcome that you're trying to test in an experiment. All right, so that's the experiment Supertag. Then we have the project tag, and the project Supertag also again serves a goal, right? So instance field type, instance Supertag is goal, and then again field has semantic function part of. This is important, and again I'm going to show you why in just a minute. That is the serves the goal field. Then again we have a status field. This is a field just for this project Supertag: in backlog, in progress, done, someday maybe, or dropped is what we're trying to show here. And then final form is the way I call the description of the end state of what I want in the project. So a recognizable description of what completed and done could look like at the end. Doesn't always happen exactly like that, but that way I have something clear to visualize what I'm working towards. Then info, random place to record things, and then a query that searches for every task where the project is set to parent. So the parent project of that search. And in this example, this would be the published video on planning in Tana. Now, finally, we have the task. And the task has the project it links to, and this project field is again an instance field with the instance Supertag of project, and it has the semantic function of part of. Now you've seen this semantic function across different levels. We have the semantic function of part of for a task is part of a project is part of a goal is part of a macrocycle, and a macrocycle is part of a supercycle. So we're linking all of these together. And in just a moment, I'm going to show you what cool things we can do with it, just to finally configure the task Supertag and get that done. We have status, to do, in progress, done, dropped, archived. We have a due date field set, and we have a planned for date set. This allows you to then query for things you want to do on a specific day, even though it is not due that day. What I've also done here, and we need to go back to the project in a second as well, is that for this task, the task is shown as a checkbox, right? You see that over here. And we have activated the done state mapping. And what that means is that we can select from the status field, for example, but you could call this field whatever you like, and say, okay, if the status is either done, dropped, or archived, you see the checkbox over here. And if it has the status of to do or in progress, you don't see the checkbox. So let me select an unchecked status here. So let's take to do, and you see the checkbox is unchecked. And the interesting thing here is that what happens if I click just the checkbox, right? Like, which status does it jump to? And so you see here, it jumps to done because it is the first referenced field here in the map check to field. That means if I just click the checkbox itself, that's the status it selects. Really neat feature, very, very convenient. And of course, we've set this up for the project as well. So shows checkbox here for the project Supertag, map checkbox state to field values, done and dropped, and in backlog, in progress, and someday maybe are still unchecked. Now, one thing I mentioned in the beginning is that you can use the fields that we have here, so start date and end date, to configure your day node tag to show you the current active cycle. And that obviously is very convenient because it allows you to prompt you and remind you what you're currently working on, what you're working towards, and will become the perfect place to show you the power of the part of semantic fields. So let's see what happens. Here I am on the daily node page, right? And I have here a live query, live search set up in my day tag. And this looks for, and this is a slightly complicated setup, but very powerful, is first it looks for any node that is tagged either as a supercycle or a macrocycle. This is what this first OR field is supposed to. This is what this first OR field does. Now, to remind you, you can always at the bottom here click on OR, and it enters this OR selection. You see here on the very left that everything in here is an AND clause, right? So any node must match what is up here. But to have choices, you use the OR field, right? So we're looking for any node that is either a supercycle or a macrocycle. But because this is an AND, we're also looking for nodes that match this condition and match this condition and match this condition, right? So we have three conditions that must be matched. And the first one looks for supercycles and macrocycle tags. And the second one compares the start date field to the parent. And the parent, because this is a day node, is the date of the day you're currently on. And so here we're looking whether the defined supercycle or macrocycle has a start date that maps exactly to today's date, or where the start date is less than today, right? If the start was before today. And then what we're looking for is the end date field, whether today is the exact end date, or whether the end date is greater than today's date, right? So that way we see only the defined supercycle that overlaps today's date, right? We're not seeing everything in the future. We're not seeing the super tags in the past. We're only seeing the cycles that are currently running. And that's a really powerful way to have Tana prompt your day and to show you, okay, this is on the docket right now. This is the super cycle. We're working towards independence, and in the macro cycle, the first one that works towards that independence goal, we're looking to build a new baseline. And because, of course, this is a Tana live query, what we can do here is we can just expand this, right? And see, okay, what are the goals that we're working on right now? So that is incredibly powerful. Now, I mentioned the part of semantic field function, and I want to show you why that in particular is powerful. So let me show you. What I want to have is all the projects that are part of the current supercycle, right? So let me create a new search, and we're going to look for projects that serves a goal where the system field is components recursive. And what we enter here now is parent, right? So we're looking for projects that serve recursively this supercycle. Now, if I click done, you see publish video on planning in Tana. Now, this is mind-blowing because there is no direct link between that project and this supercycle, right? Like if I click here, like there's nothing that links directly to the supercycle independence, like nothing. But we have defined the serves goal field, and this project serves a goal, and this goal is part of a macro cycle, and that macro cycle is part of this supercycle, right? So this search is something that Tana can interpret and that can give you results for. So here we can now say, okay, all the current projects, right? And the same, of course, is something I can do here for the macro cycle, right? So I can say, go ahead and give me every task where the project field, and here we do another field search. We type rec, components rec is what we're looking for, and then parent, right? And now we're looking for every task where the project is connected through the goal, part of the macro cycle. And boom, now these two tasks. And of course, what we can do is we can group these by project, right? I don't want unset projects. And we do tasks for macro cycle. And now I have here all currently active tasks grouped by the project, which is part of the goals that are part of this macro cycle. That's, to me, pretty nuts that this works. So let's review what's been going on. We defined a Supertags system that is supposed to help us plan half a year by breaking it down into 6 weeks blocks. During these 6 week blocks, we have goals that we want to accomplish and experiments that we're going to run. The goals have projects associated with them, which have tasks, and the experiments have hypotheses that we're going to test by doing certain interventions. All of these super tags are linked together, and they build a cohesive system for planning that I personally use. If you like this sort of setup, I want to direct you to this video, which shows you how to do this kind of prompting and planning on a micro scale. So we're going to look at half-hour to 2-hour blocks of time. If you like this video, you'll love that. And otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to learn how to build super tag systems like this for yourself according to your own needs, check out my course Mastering Tana Core, link down below. And I'll see you in the next video next week. Bye bye.